Hello, welcome to Older and Loving It, a program designed to address the legal and life planning concerns of seniors and their families. My name is Philip Summers. I'm an elder law and estate planning attorney with Summers & Associates located in Acton, Massachusetts. On today's program, we'll be discussing Lyme disease. Lyme disease is an infection that can be spread by being bitten by an infected tick and is often misdiagnosed. Each year, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention reports more than 20,000 diagnosed cases of Lyme disease in the United States. But many authorities agree that CDC reported cases greatly underestimate the number of actual cases. If you've been diagnosed with Lyme disease, you'll likely know how severe and debilitating it can be. Lyme disease is a major problem, and cases have been documented in just about every part of the world. We are fortunate to have Kurt Hayes join us today. Kurt is the co-founder of Lyme Light, a grassroots organization dedicated to shedding light on the public health hazards of Lyme disease in Massachusetts. This includes a focus on legislation, innovation, treatment, and education that is needed to stop Lyme disease. Kurt lives in Boxborough, Massachusetts with his wife and 3 children. Kurt formed Lyme Light after his own son, who was 8 years old at the time, was misdiagnosed several times with behavioral issues and then a brain tumor before getting rushed to Boston Children's Hospital for urgent testing and finally receiving the correct diagnosis and treatment for Lyme disease. Kurt, welcome to the program.
Thanks, appreciate the opportunity to be here today.
Thank you. Let's start with the basics, Kurt. What is Lyme disease? We've heard a lot about it, but I wonder if you just clear up the confusion of actually what it is.
Sure, I mean, at its simplest form, Lyme disease is a bacterial infection of a spirochete type of bacteria that's caused by, as you mentioned, the bite of an infected deer tick. Now the keys to know is that if we get early diagnosis and treatment, often Lyme disease is overcome very quickly and easily. But however, if it's untreated, which you referred to, a lot of people are misdiagnosed, as the example of my son, the symptoms get worse, it gets much harder to overcome, and as you mentioned, Lyme disease can end up becoming a debilitating disease.
And obviously, the horrors you've gone through, your son and all the, not knowing, I'm sure it's probably weighed heavily on you and your wife's mind. And also having, we also have a short clip that we're going to play.
Right.
But how common is Lyme disease?
Well, it is, as you mentioned, it's very common, and we have a chart we could show that kind of points out, if you look at a map of the United States, you see that we have in blue, if you will, it'll show the places where we do have Lyme disease, and it's definitely concentrated here in the Northeast, in New England. But if we try to drill down more specifically to where we all live here in Massachusetts, we are ranked 4th in the country, even though we're a fairly small state, in the number of Lyme disease cases, just the raw number, as well as what we often talk about in the area of diseases, the incidence rate, the number of cases per 100,000. So it is definitely a place where we are right at the center of what some people call is an epidemic.
Sure.
Now I have another chart where I like to drill into the numbers as I do these Lyme Light events where we get into the facts and try to educate and raise awareness. I show them that we have numbers that here in Massachusetts, even though we have a high incidence rate, if you start drilling into the towns where we all live, like Acton and Boxborough, you see that our incidence rates are as high as you see in the places where typically understand there is a big problem with Lyme disease. We're high in places like Acton, Boxborough, Harvard, as they are out on Cape Cod and on the islands.
Sure.
So it's not like the epidemic of Lyme disease is coming to this area, it's already here.
Also in states like Maine and New Hampshire, it's already here as well, I imagine.
Definitely the entire Northeast, that's where the cases are focused. But it is, as you mentioned in the intro, it is something that every state is seeing, and it's a growing problem.
Yeah. Now, just to get back to what Lyme disease, we have a short video that I think is probably appropriate to play right now.
Yeah, definitely.
Maybe if you could cue it up for us.
Sure. This is a documentary movie about Lyme disease called Under Our Skin, and we can talk afterwards about where folks can see it. But this is a very good overview of, if people aren't already aware, that there is a huge controversy. The science is still out on Lyme disease. The early diagnosis we pointed out, but when someone is undiagnosed, what they go through. And within the medical community, there are 2 sides. Everyone is well-intentioned. One that says, look, Lyme disease, when it's misdiagnosed, can take a long time to overcome. We need longer-term treatments. And another side that says if you've been treated with the normal courses of antibiotics and you're still sick, you still have symptoms, something's wrong with your immune system,
Sure.
but it's not Lyme disease. So this gives a very quick intro of what people are up against, doctors and the patients.
Great. Why don't we play that right now?
Okay.
I didn't know what was happening to me. Thought I was gonna die.
He kept saying to us, I have no idea what this is.
We have, I think, a horrible epidemic. It's the next tsunami.
I used to do ballet.
She just went downhill very fast.
I went from being a gifted athlete to there's times when it's hard to put a shirt on.
It just doesn't seem possible that this poppy seed-sized thing is going to make you bedridden, possibly for the rest of your life.
There's Lyme disease everywhere.
It's more prevalent than AIDS.
How many more people are going to suffer before the truth comes out?
As citizens, we ought to be astonished and alarmed.
The major medical journals have published that chronic Lyme disease is not real and it's a psychosomatic condition.
I kept getting poo-pooed by the doctors.
We don't think there's anything wrong with you.
There is nothing wrong.
There's no medicine for someone like you.
They don't have any evidence of ever having had Lyme disease once.
She shouldn't have had to die.
We know about Lyme disease. It's something that we have a good handle on.
Well, that's nonsense.
Such a waste. Insurance companies trying to get rid of doctors who cost them a lot of money.
What he'll do will be to cite that there's no such thing as chronic Lyme disease. They don't want to pay.
It is difficult for doctors who want to stand up and help these patients.
Dr. Jim Seck's license is suspended.
There's a message that's going to be sent to the other doctors that it's not safe to take a Lyme patient on and treat them.
I had to fight for what I got. I'm glad to be here.
By the time you're so disabled, you're in a panic state. How do you know how to fix it? How do you know what to do?
All right, that was very interesting. And now let's talk about the root of the problem. You know, in terms of what they look like and how they operate. And if you can, shed a little bit of light on that, Kurt.
Sure, yeah, we can get to, we have some charts to actually show what the deer ticks look like and so forth. And what we have on the chart, I hope is up, it's called deer ticks. You know, they can see what a female looks like, a male, and then we have what the other life stages, what is called a nymph and larva. And the key thing to point out here is that those little numbers there, that's a centimeter scale. So that's the biggest problem, is that these ticks are very hard to see and to even know that you've been bitten. And on the bottom of this, we kind of show that these ticks at various stages of their feeding, you know, they do get bigger as they're feeding off of you. So the biggest problems are, there are two big problem areas that we can talk about as far as the timing for Lyme disease. We can pop that up real quick. You can see on the chart that certainly the spring months are the ones that are the most common, where we have the most incidence of Lyme disease, and that is because these nymph, the very tiny ticks that you can't even feel on your skin or necessarily even see, especially, you know, we talk about seniors who are out gardening and that, they may never know they've been bitten. That's when they can get Lyme disease. Also, another important time to worry about is, we're just coming into it, if we, you know, people are watching this in the early fall, the ticks, the nymphs that have got their spring feeding are now coming out, they're emerging as adults in the fall. Just when we start to have our first freezes and people begin to think that, you know, the bugs are gone, that the freezes don't affect the ticks, so they're out in those fall months again looking for their next meal. And
so you're still susceptible to Lyme disease, even though we're having frost cycles, and it's still a risky time of the year.
One thing we talk about, you know, it's almost always tick time. The only time it's really safe is when we have snow on the ground and it's below freezing constantly. That's when the ticks are inactive. But even if we have a nice day in February and folks want to get out there and go hiking on the conservation land because we have a nice day.
You have cabin fever, you want to get outside and walk around.
You still have the ticks that are out there. And then, we can't talk about the problem of Lyme disease and some of the basics without understanding this whole idea of hosts and reservoirs. The hosts are where do these ticks get their blood meals from, and reservoirs are those animals that help pass on Lyme disease to if the tick doesn't have Lyme disease, it can go feed on an animal and get it, and then it helps perpetuate the problem. Now, I showed the two main culprits that we can get into all the details, but not today, obviously, that people will hear about is the white-footed mouse is the most common host and reservoir for the younger stage ticks to get their blood meal out in the forest. Those white-footed mice are all over. Everybody hears a lot about white-tailed deer. But I just show on this chart that there are a lot of other critters running around that can act as hosts, feeding stations for the ticks as well as helping pass it on. So when we talk about ways to ultimately eradicate and prevent the disease, reduce the tick population, it's not just deer and mice.
Right.
Chipmunks, birds, dogs, definitely people who have pets, or they need to consider that as well.
Yeah. Kurt, one thing we haven't talked about is really the symptoms of Lyme disease. I know your son was misdiagnosed. Can you just go over what the symptoms are and what parents and seniors should be looking for?
Sure. We have a chart with the symptoms, or we talk about it being the great imitator. And these symptoms that people see, from rash to chills, headaches, stiff neck, arthritis type problems, shooting pains. In the case of my son, meningitis, eye inflammation, things like that. It imitates a lot of other diseases. So that's why it's very important for folks to get educated, for us to keep educating the medical community that there are a lot of symptoms. And another unfortunate part of the area with Lyme disease is the diagnosis is supposed to be clinical. That means there's a blood test, but it's not always accurate. It's checking your immune system response. So if your immune system is not fighting it correctly, it won't show as a positive test. So doctors need to look at the clinical diagnosis. Do you live in an endemic area, an area where there is a lot of Lyme disease? We certainly do.
Sure.
Do you like to hike in conservation land? Is it the time of year when the ticks are out? Were you feeling fine, and then all of a sudden these symptoms started to come? And that's the thing. Another thing with seniors and with a lot of teenagers, etc. We want to dismiss things. It's growing pains, or I'm getting older and I don't feel as well. And then we don't get to the doctor as soon as we can, and that's what we need to, part of our education with Limelight is making sure people understand what these symptoms are and to get to their doctors quickly and to be an advocate for their own health.
So you certainly want to raise these concerns with the doctor, make sure the doctor is aware of your activities.
Right, I even, absolutely, and of course if you know you've been bitten by a tick, you can show that tick to the doctor, but the problem with Lyme disease is that so many people never know they even got bitten, so they just show up with symptoms. They won't have this, there's a telltale rash called the bullseye rash, but that only happens in about 50% of the people, or it can be an odd-looking rash. So it's more about the symptoms.
I assume not all ticks are infected, is that correct?
Correct. There are, not all ticks are infected, so you can't just assume because you got bitten but definitely kind of logged, I know I got bitten, and then, within a few weeks, keep a log of, how are you feeling, what was going on, because that obviously will help if any symptoms do start to show up. You can tell all that to your doctor.
Now, after you've gone outside, if you were hiking and you do examine your body or your children's body, or if you're caretaking for a senior, if you do see a tick on the person, and I know there's a lot of misconception out there, how do you remove a tick?
Right.
A lot of wives' tales. What is the best way to remove a tick?
Well, that certainly is one of the things that we want to make sure people understand that, right? You've done everything you can, you do have a tick, and there are a lot of wives' tales out there that we have to dispel. You do not do anything like burn the tick, or people say, I heard you put dishwashing detergent or something on it to make it back out or irritate it. But really, in that way, you can irritate and injure the tick and actually cause it to, in a way, regurgitate into your bloodstream. So what you want to do is, and there are various tick removers out there. We have a slide that kind of shows some advice on the methods. There are various tick removers people can get at, pet stores, hardware stores, online. You get underneath that tick, and with steady pressure, you pull up, and it can take some time to pull the tick out, and then clean that area with like antiseptic or iodine. And then, of course, note when that happened, watch yourself. If the tick, the bigger it is, that means the longer it was attached. Certainly there's more danger the longer it's been attached. And again, talk to their doctors. There are some doctors in our area that are getting the understanding of how serious of a problem is, and if you go in there and talk to them about what happened, they might even talk about they call it a prophylactic type approach of antibiotics, where they might proactively treat you, because you do not want to let these symptoms set in. But again, that's another thing we tell people, don't necessarily wait till you're sick. Have that conversation with your doctor now, or if your grandparents, have your kids talk to their kids' pediatricians to find out what is their attitude about Lyme disease, what is their own experience. Hopefully, if that doctor's ever seen this type of situation, like my son with misdiagnosis, and they thought they understood it, they'll be more careful. But we do have to make sure people are their own advocate with their doctor.
At least great awareness.
Yep.
Now, short of staying indoors all the time and basically being a shut-in, what are things that you can do in order to stop the spread of disease or actually prevent it?
Right. And those are definitely some key things to talk about. The prevention. And we have a couple things that we can show. One slide is prevention for yourself, because my kids want to go outside and play. We live in a suburban, rural, forested neighborhood. But some of the key things that you can do to be comfortable with, if you can, long shirt, long pants, tucked in, light colors so you can see the ticks. If you can, walk in the middle of paths, etc. But one of the key things is when you come inside after being out in that environment, is a great thing to do. The clothes, they could be on your clothes now. Take the clothes, put them in the dryer for 20 or 30 minutes. That will kill the ticks. Two things that ticks do not stand and can't tolerate are dryness and heat. So if you put those clothes in the dryer, that will kill them. If you put them in the washer first, that doesn't necessarily kill. They can live.
They're resistant to the wash machine.
Right. So put them in the dryer, or if you can't dry them right away, at least try to put those clothes in a plastic bag. But the most important thing is a tick check. We need you take a shower or a bath at the end of that day. Don't go overnight so it has a chance to possibly
So at the end of
attach.
the day, make sure you do an examination.
Right. By the end of the day, get an examination. If you're in a bath or a shower, that helps kind of wash them away if you're scrubbing, etc. But that tick check is the most important thing. And then there are also things people can do in their yards.
I was going to mention that. Is there certain things that the ticks like to, gravitate to? Like I know mosquitoes like standing water. Is it comparable to other insects?
Yeah, I mean the kind of environment that we have in our suburban forested neighborhood is perfect. They like the low brush. They like damp, moist areas. So things like cleaning up the brush piles around your yard. We definitely talk about if you have grass, keep it cut short. And then if you have that forest right off your grass, try to create kind of a barrier. You can put a 3 or 4 foot wide barrier of like bark mulch, or I think even better, some of that small light colored stone that heats up and is can stay dry.
That's right.
They're not going to necessarily cross over, but you can do all those types of things. But also you have to be aware that as we have these little critters I talked about earlier running around our yards, the ticks can still get into your yard. You just have to, it's the diligence, it's being careful. And then we also, we have to talk a lot about the dog owners. Myself, we have a dog, we go walking, we're very careful, but they often, attract the ticks, because again, the ticks stay fairly low in the brush. They're not flying around, they're not jumping around, but they'll attach to the dog, or at least hitch a ride into your house, especially if you're doing a tick treatment for the dog, prevention. The tick might come into your house and then jump off the dog, and you again have to be more careful. So just a lot of it is diligence and do those tick checks as frequently
I imagine
as you
that's
can.
Particularly important if individuals have their pets on their bed. The pets could jump off like for a cat or a dog.
Absolutely, that's one of those things that that dog that's sleeping on your bed, again, the tick might attach to them, or again, if they have the tick treatment, it could jump off, and then it's in your bed or on your furniture, and you have to be careful. That's why it's not always that you're out crawling around, in the woods. You can just be living your life, walking your dog, and still be at risk in this area where we know there are a lot of the ticks that carry Lyme disease.
Sure. And then in terms if you're out away from your house, is there things that, would you recommend, again, wait until the evening to check yourself over, or is it appropriate to check periodically?
I think, if you've been out for the day and now you're back in, that's the best time to just do that, again, with the clothes in the dryer, and then do the thorough check. I know in our own family, again, I'm not going to keep my kids inside where, my other son, this summer, he'd been out running around the woods with his friends, took a shower, and he said, hey, there was a tick crawling on my arm, and he didn't even feel it because, again, they're so small.
Sure.
But just that fact that he was washing his body and the water, it didn't get to attach. So it was, and I looked at it, and it was a deer tick and, all that. But, it is that diligence. Be careful. And just know, if you like to garden, if you like to hike on conservation land and around your yard, you're going to be at risk. People can go to the nurseries to get deer-resistant type plants, because a lot of it is, again, one of the main hosts that carries the ticks and gives them a feeding are the mini white-tailed deer that we have around here. So things that don't attract that, plants that don't attract them into your yard where the ticks might fall off and keep going.
Yeah. Kurt, I know you're also very active in advocating through legislation. I wonder if you can just tell me some of the things that we're doing in Massachusetts and maybe they can be applicable to other states.
Sure, that's a very important point because I think we do need government involvement to help stop Lyme disease. I'm very confident we can do it. But at the federal level, there are bills out there that are going to help provide more funding for Lyme disease research, get definitive testing that will tell you definitely you have it or you don't. Make sure there's more education and awareness. So folks can personally reach out to their congressmen and senators to make sure they're signing on to that bill. As you mentioned though, here in Massachusetts, we took action with the cooperation of the state legislature and the governor and a lot of activists, families that have been impacted by Lyme disease, to address the issue that was touched on in the movie clip, Under Our Skin, which is we now have in place a bill that was passed in the summer of 2010, signed into law, that a doctor cannot be brought before their medical board just for using their best judgment and experience to treat their patients with longer-term antibiotics if the symptoms are not being cured. So that's a key thing, and it has happened in Massachusetts and other states. So there's a key piece of protection for the doctors, although we need to do more. There was also attached to the budget this summer a Lyme disease commission that's being created, which is going to be very beneficial in that they're going to study it more, get the different sides, again, within the medical community, and find out real proactive steps that we can take to educate doctors, educate people, and again, help stop Lyme disease. So I would encourage folks, reach out to their state representatives, their state senators, the governor, et cetera, to go ahead and help get this legislation focused on and passed. And with local, even with your local selectmen.
I was going to mention, on the local level, I know you're very active. I know you go to communities, senior community centers,
right?
And a big part of it is education. So I want to think, what can people do to really impact on the local level? Sure,
at a local level, one thing, like talk about that prevention with selectmen. You could talk to the selectmen about the need to make sure that the conservation paths are wide, and the wider they are, they can be drier. People aren't rubbing up against the brush. So those types of things. But in the community, I encourage folks to reach out to my group, Limelight. We will work with their group, whether it's a church, a school, just an organization to concern citizens. We've done things at senior centers with the garden clubs where we do our Limelight program, invite folks in to learn the practicalities about what is Lyme disease, how do you know you have it, how to prevent it. So we're more than willing to do that. That's how we're helping spread the word. Because if we can just help people avoid what happened to my own family, then I feel like we're being successful. So folks can reach out to Limelight. We'll help set up events in the region.
And your website is called limelight.org, is that correct?
Limelight.org, LYMELITE.org.
And we'll put it on the screen too. To
they can email, they can reach out to us that way, and we will certainly work with them to help.
What are some of the resources that you have that you can help other communities? Obviously, education is a big
education and awareness is just so key, because as I started doing this education with folks, I realized there are so many misunderstandings about Lyme disease, and I think you mentioned it yourself when we were talking about this before, and I saw it that night my son was diagnosed. I went on the internet on my little BlackBerry and started searching on Lyme disease, and you immediately see there are the two sides within the medical community, and the science is out. So really it's just, we continue to focus on education and awareness out there.
Yeah, it's really, for me, it was an eye-opener. I mean, it's been, for the most part, under the radar, but it's really, I think it's become to the forefront of consciousness.
Yeah, every time we do these events, you ask folks, raise your hand if you know someone, a close family member, friend, loved one, including your pet, who's had Lyme disease, and just about everybody in our area knows someone, so they understand how debilitating this is and how common it is.
Well, Kurt, this has been very informative. I wonder if you could, if our viewers have any questions or like to get additional information, what is the best way to contact you?
Through the website, and also they can call me. The phone number to contact me is 978-621-8616. And again, I think you guys can show on the screen rather than me try to tell them what the email ID is, which can sometimes be misheard, but it's limelight.org@gmail.com. So, but just pick up the phone, give me a call. We basically can bring the education and awareness session to whatever the venue is. We ask the folks that just work with us to help make people aware that it is coming, and we get well-attended events, and then we always walk out of there with some people going, I did not know that. I feel much better, able to protect myself. I'm going to talk to my grandkids and my kids now about it. I'm going to go talk to my doctor, because they realize what a problem that we do have here with Lyme disease in Massachusetts.
Well, Kurt, thank you very much, and thank you for the efforts. I mean, this is very important activities you're undertaking to overcome this, what I would consider to be almost an epidemic. That's all we have for today in today's show. First of all, I'd like to thank our production crew, Ed Pascarosa, who's our floor director, and also Jonathan Daisy, who's our director. My name's Philip Summers. Thank you for tuning in to Older and Loving It. And if you have any suggestions or comments, please feel free to drop us a line. We look forward to hearing from you. Again, thank you for tuning in.